Hello, everyone. Where have all the male literary fiction authors gone? Now, before we get started, I would just like to remind everyone that if you would like to purchase a literary fiction book, that my book, The Ecstasy and the Ignominy, is available. It is essentially a story that is a combination of A Tale of Two Cities, um, a little bit of Anna Karenina and Crime and Punishment, and so on. It has a very Shakespearean, Dickensian, Melvillian um, feel to it. So, if you're interested in literary fiction, you might like that. But anyway, I have noticed that there just aren't a lot of male literary fiction authors, and of course, even the female ones don't really. Even they are few, and they don't really write the kind of fiction that I write, which is fiction based on classic literature, historical classic literature. And but for example, on TikTok, I cannot find even a single literary fiction author other than myself. And I'm especially talking about literary fiction content creators, people who make um, who make content and they also write literary fiction. Um, I do not know of very many. I certainly don't know of any on TikTok. Um, YouTube is a little different. There are a few who do make content and write literary fiction, but but even there's a difference because most of the writers that I can think of on YouTube who do that usually aren't published, either traditionally published or self-published. They're usually very lax in their output, both when it comes to fiction and when it comes to actually posting content. And so I am the only literary fiction author, even on YouTube, that I know of who is consistent, fairly consistent at putting out content and makes writes literary fiction. Now, I am not talking about men who read literary fiction and then talk about it, as a critic. I'm talking about people who create new literary fiction. Um, that is quite rare. And I think it's unfortunate because I think that we need people who not just curate the past, who are critics. We need people who create new literary fiction because that is how we innovate as a society. Without that, society becomes stagnant. And but no, I just don't see very many, and I've always often wondered why. Um, Mainly because fiction has always been something that I have loved. Writing poetry has always been something that I have loved, writing poetically. And so I don't really understand really why people wouldn't be interested in it because that's it's always been second nature to me. And so it's something that I have always had trouble understanding. Um, but I do think one reason why you don't see a lot of literary fiction authors, really, rather whether male or female, on the internet is because many literary fiction authors are kind of hiding, I think, in their own kind of ivory towers by going to, let's say, certain unknown or obscure corners of Substack or hiding within universities, and they aren't actually trying to bring literary fiction to general audiences, which I think is a mistake. I think if you're going to reach people or change the culture, you have to be able to at least try to reach people in that way. Um, I think that literary fiction is for everyone, that everyone can appreciate complex literature. It's not just for a select few. Now, of course, some people have suggested that somehow that if literary fiction went to the mainstream, that somehow it would become commercialized and it would be ruined and all of that, which I can definitely see that there's a danger of that. But I think that, of course, anytime something becomes popular, it will be commercialized in some ways. Um, at least there are certain aspects of it will be. Um, but the upside is that it can reach more people and actually change the world that way, even though there may be certain aspects where it may become commercialized in a way that can be cheap or soulless. But I think that true literary fiction authors who have integrity know how to navigate that, and they know when to say no, and when something is working and when something is not working. And but I also resent this notion though that if something is popular, that therefore it must automatically be bad. But no, Dickens was considered popular in his time, and he was often criticized for it. But now we consider him to be literary fiction. The same with Shakespeare, and so it is true that a lot of commercial things are not very good or trash or whatever, but that doesn't mean everything is. I think that it is entirely possible to be commercially successful and for something to also be a great work of literature. It's all about finding the right balance. But I do think it is unfortunate that so many literary fiction authors aren't actually willing to take things to the mainstream, because that just means that that you won't be able to change the culture that way, because you aren't actually trying to reach people. And so I think that's one reason is that literary fiction authors are stuck in their own ivory towers. Um, but also, I can see how if you are in a field where that some, especially male literary fiction authors, that if because they are in a field where they are competing with a lot of women, how that might be intimidating, and how if they grow up in that kind of environment, they may start to believe that literary fiction or other kinds of fiction, that it's a female thing and not something that men can participate in, which of course is entirely false. And I think that, but I also think that we've seen a decrease in literary fiction authors just across the board, and including among men. It's just because of the anti-intellectual nature of our society, where we increasingly live in a society where people are so suspicious of anything that they perceive as intellectual, that somehow that means that you are being pretentious or not real, which in reality people only do that as a defense mechanism when they don't understand something, and that so they blame the artist instead of looking inward. But I think because we live in a society where there's that kind of pressure, um, it can make it where where men who might turn towards literary fiction won't, because it's not seen as something that is credible. And this goes beyond stereotypes about masculinity; those have existed for a long time. I think I think there is some of that, but I think it's more just this anti-intellectual sense where where it's something that's considered, I don't know, that's considered feminine, or let's say pretentious in that sense, and therefore a lot of male readers will or men will steer clear of literary fiction, both as readers and as writers. But I also think just that literary fiction is still stuck within the confines of traditional publishing, where where it's where where it's still considered, there's this level of prestige around it, where it's like, if where independent publishing is still considered only for genre fiction. But I think that's absurd. I think that one of the reasons why authors like me like to publish literary fiction is because we can have complete control, and we don't have to submit to what a publisher wants or what a university wants. But I still think there's this idea that literary fiction is only for books that are critically acclaimed, but it has nothing to do with being critically acclaimed. A literary fiction book, and I probably should have defined it earlier, is a book that explores the beauty of language and the beauty of character, and it harmonizes those themes in order to create something truly profound and beautiful, and even radiant, one could say. And that's literary fiction. And but because we live in a world where those things are not quite valued, because we live in a world where art is under assault, where people are becoming so self-righteous and not very nuanced in their thinking, that kind of art can start to be considered um, it can start to be considered a lie among people who may otherwise appreciate it, because they have been indoctrinated to believe that life is simple and that there are easy answers to everything. And that's not how life is. But I think many people have been trained to see it that way, and it's very unfortunate that we live in such a society um, where reading is not appreciated, where writing is not really appreciated, and then you have certain female authors who write for emotional reasons, but even there, many of their work, many of those books are not probing deeply. Um, I think also that men have been taught, especially, to repress their emotions, to not give in to passions and all of that. But by doing that, you need that actually in order to develop an artistic side. You need to be in touch with your feelings. You need to be in touch with romantic inclinations. I am a highly romantic person. I am a romantic ultimately at heart. I feel very deeply. But when we live in a society where that is frowned upon, then that can create a system where art cannot thrive because people are not in touch with their emotions like they should be. And again, that I'm speculating at reasons. I really don't know, because sorry, because I really don't know, because writing literary fiction is so second nature to me that I don't understand why other people wouldn't enjoy it. And so it's one of those things where I think also that social media has played a role in making people so dull and distractible that they don't want to consume anything that requires real work. That's not to say that social media doesn't have its uses; it definitely does. But there is certainly a problem there where people are not actually engaging deeply because they are too distractible. But again, it's all about balance in the end. Um, and so I think all of these factors, though, have contributed to literary fiction not being valued in society, and especially now, I think because algorithms are not efficient at bringing literary fiction to the people who would actually enjoy it. They can also disincentivize men, especially who are goal oriented, from making it. But I do feel really alone because I don't really know of anyone who is doing what I am doing in the way that I am doing it. And but on one hand, that makes me somewhat of a pioneer, I suppose, the fact that I'm writing these kinds of books, but I don't really have a lot of peers. But at the same time, it can also be lonely because there is not really a set path for me. So I guess that's my rant for today. Um, Again, if you want to support this channel, my books are linked in the description section. And until next time, goodbye.